Welcome to Carly's Colorful Corner, where we will learn how to paint an adorable or beautiful babbling baby chick using watercolor. First, you're going to want to consider, what color is my chick going to be? If you're going for an Easter theme, you could choose between the different colors of peeps, or you could focus on just the yellow feathers of a chick itself. I myself would prefer to focus specifically on the yellow color. So I'm going to take my paintbrush and I am going to get it damp, towel wet, damp, kind of like how you towel dry your hair and your hair still wet afterwards. You want your brush to be kind of this consistency. That way it can pick up paint, but it's not too watery where the paint's going to splooge everywhere. Gather up that paint until the tip of your paintbrush starts turning your selected color. And then let's begin outlining the chick's body area, starting from the top all the way down to the bottom. Once your paint starts getting kind of dry, where you can have like little bits of white of the paper showing through, the brush might be leaving an unfinished line. At that point, you're going to set aside your skinny small paintbrush and you're going to trade out for a medium flat brush. Dampen that brush just like you did with brush number one and drag that color in from your outline into the center or towards the body. This is a way where you can spread color in a controlled manner, and it will also give you the opportunity to get that bold, dark, bright outline that's really going to make your chick pop. Now, you may have to revisit your yellow palette or your palette of yellow paint with just a little dot of yellow as you're moving your brush around the paper because this is a pretty big area that we're dealing with here. And we didn't necessarily put a wash down, but we are using a damp brush to kind of help spread the color around, thin it out, and give it that faded look. That way you can keep that bright, bold outline that I was talking about earlier. Now, if you need to add paint to your brush, just add a little drop of paint, a little drop of water. You don't want to go too crazy with the paint or the water because then it's going to get out of control. You may also switch to maybe a smaller brush when working around the cheek area and the shell. Now we can start building or blending. So, starting from the outside of your chick's head, moving in more towards the face or the center of the face. Ooh, excuse me. You are actually going to add dots of yellow color in these areas. This is going to give you a rounded kind of effect around your head because the shadow is moving up and around the chick's spherical skull. So you can repeat this process to the left and the right hand side of your chick. It all depends on where your light source is coming from. Mine is coming from basically the center up towards the face. So, just an idea for you to add some realism to your piece. We're actually going to have this area dry a little bit and then we'll come back and add more detail to it later. Let's work on the wings instead because we don't want to work on a wet surface if we can avoid it because that is going to prevent catastrophe. Clean out that beautiful tiny little brush that you've been using for your outline piece and get it nice and damp like we discussed before. And in this time, instead, choose your wing color. It could still be the yellow that you've chosen for your chick's head. However, I was kind of aiming for maybe some green. Maybe I want like a baby lovebird. So I'm gonna put a thick layer of paint on the outside of my wing And with my medium brush, I'm going to start dragging that paint in using a damp kind of bristled surface with my brush's end. As you can see, I'm going to repeat this process with the other side of the bird's wing as well. And you can also kind of use this to put down your filler shade or the shade that kind of fills in the entirety of the shape, such as the wing. And if you would like, you could build even more on that color to create shadow inside the wing itself. Like I'm going to create some shadow kind of, extending out from the inside of the bird's wing out towards the edge of the wing's feathers. Totally up to you though. You can use one solid color or you can build and add a secondary layer of paint like I did. Totally up to you, but just remember I am working in small increments of paint and small, if not to damp amount of water, not like a lot of water, just damp enough for that kind of towel hair texture I was talking about earlier. Now that I have my wings to my liking, I am going to start working on the eyes, but I'm going to be super, super careful. I don't want a lot of water when I'm doing this. I want to use a small brush to allow me lots of control. I want a kind of damp brush, even a little less damp than what we have been originally using. Specifically because this is such a small area, you don't really have the luxury of using more water because the water will splooge out past your pencil line into your bird's face. And that's something you don't want to happen. So just go slow. If you have to dab in that black with a very light feather hand touch, then please do so. Feel free to pause this video before moving on to the next step. Remember, it's a fade in, fade out sequence. So when I start fading out, I'm ending that part of the step. And when I fade in, I'm beginning a new step. If you want your bird to be super, super extra cute, you can add a few white spots to your piece by avoiding painting in those areas, and those will create your highlight points for those cute, adorable eyes. You may have to revisit your palette, gather up some more of that black, but let's use this time to outline our shell casing using black paint or paint that you decide for of your own choosing. I mean, this is your art and this is your artwork, and you get to choose what color you want your shell to be. I simply use black because I'm going to use the white of the paper to help me create a pattern on my shell using oil pastel. Totally up to you though. Your art, your choice. Just remember, we're not getting too crazy with our water, but we are using a decent amount of paint. In fact, a large ratio of paint versus water. This is called a dry on dry, where your brush is kind of dry. It has a lot of paint on it, and it's being applied to a dry surface. It's great for outlines. If you want to do those pink little cheeks, go for it. Just make sure that your brush is super clean and rinsed out and all that black color is gone because you don't want your cheeks to kind of have like blackish gray in them. It's really going to dilute the intensity of that red color if that happens. So with that being said, you're going to want to clean that brush really well, put some red paint on it, and start painting inside that circle. Very little water, lots of paint. If you want to lighten up that area, you can do a lift effect where you take a towel and lift some of that color off the paper if you're looking more for a pink cheek versus a red cheek. Totally up to you. Next, we're going to paint our treble clef. Now, I kind of wanted to maintain that red color specifically because I didn't want to deal with all the drama of cleaning my paint out. You can choose to use whatever color you want for your treble clef and for your musical notes. I decided to do red because it's easier. Remember, during this process, you're also going to be using the dry on dry technique where you have a mostly dry brush with lots of paint on it as you apply it to the dry paper. This is going to make a really bold statement and it's going to make that treble clef pop out from the background of your white paper. We're going to continue this process with your musical notes as well. You get to choose what type of musical notes that you would like to be applied to your paper. I would advise kind of drawing them out first to give yourself a map. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I used oil pastel to make these cute little designs on the egg using swirlies and patterns of my own choice. You can choose to do this in watercolor or you can choose to do it in pastel. I chose to do it in pastel. I'm not really sure why. It just sounded like a good idea, so I did it. I also used oil pastel as well for the sheet music lines in my piece, specifically because the oil pastel allows me more control. I am a stronger drawer than I am a painter, and my hand has a tendency to sometimes shake a little bit, so I was worried about getting a steady line. Now, if you want to do this in watercolor, that's fine. For today, I'm kind of focusing on using like really bold, bright colors. So I figured the oil pastel would be a good substitute to ensure that I would have a steady line. If you're looking for more of a party look, maybe some confetti or some really cute Easter speckles, that's totally up to you. You're going to take a wet brush and put a bunch of paint on it of your choice and spray that puppy around on your paper. If you don't want any of it to be sprayed upon your chick, then make sure that you cover your chick before moving forward. But this is a nice Jackson Pollock or speckled way to kind of add detail or a flair to your piece. This is also a great way to create like sea foam or ocean spray. I just thought it would be really cute to kind of have like a percussionist spray of paint all over my paper to kind of add to my musical bird piece. And that, my friend, is how you can create a beautiful babbling baby chick using watercolor.